The October sun hung low over Miller's Ridge, casting long shadows across Jack Harmon's weathered ranch. At 56, Jack had grown accustomed to the quiet that settled over his 150 acres of Montana countryside. It had been 7 years since his wife Elaine passed, and nearly 3 since his daughter Melissa moved to Minneapolis for college. The sprawling 2-story farmhouse that once echoed with laughter now stood mostly silent, save for the occasional creak of the floorboards and the loyal companionship of his border collie, Scout. The morning had started like any other. Jack rose before dawn, made his coffee strong and black, and headed out to check on his small herd of cattle. His ranch sat in a valley tucked between rolling hills and pine forests, with the abandoned Silvercrest mine tunneling into the eastern ridge, a relic from the area's brief silver rush in the 1890s. The mine had been sealed off decades ago, though local teenagers occasionally tried to venture inside, despite the county's efforts to keep them out. Jack wiped sweat from his brow as he mended a section of fence that bordered the eastern pasture. October in Montana could be unpredictable, crisp mornings giving way to surprisingly warm afternoons before the inevitable winter chill set in. His weathered hands worked methodically, the calluses evidence of years of hard labor. "What do you think, Scout? We should finish this section before lunch," Jack said, glancing at his dog who lay nearby, head between his paws but eyes alert. Scout's ears suddenly perked up, his head lifting. The dog stood, staring intently toward the rocky slope that led to the old mine entrance. "What is it, boy?" Jack straightened, following Scout's gaze. The dog let out a low whine. At first, Jack heard nothing unusual, just a gentle rustle of pine needles in the breeze and the distant lowing of cattle. Then, carried on the wind, he caught something that made his skin prickle. A sound so faint he almost thought he'd imagined it. A child's voice. Jack froze, listening intently. There was again, thin and wavering, calling out from the direction of the abandoned mine. "Hello," Jack called out, his voice echoing across the valley. No response came, but Scout was already trotting toward the slope, looking back as if urging Jack to follow. Setting down his tools, Jack pulled his cell phone from his pocket. No signal, as usual in this part of the property. With a feeling of growing unease, he grabbed his water bottle and flashlight from his truck and started up the rocky path that wound toward the seal mine entrance, Scout leading the way. The climb was steeper than Jack remembered. It had been years since he'd ventured this far up the eastern ridge. His knee, which still ached from an old rodeo injury, protested with each step. Halfway up, he paused to catch his breath, surveying his property spread out below him. From this vantage point, he could see his house in the distance, the red barn, and the grazing cattle, dots of brown and black against the green pasture. As he neared the mine entrance, Jack noticed something that made his heart sink. The heavy wooden boards that had sealed the entrance had been partially pried away, creating an opening just large enough for a person to squeeze through. Yellow caution tape lay torn and fluttering in the breeze. "Hello," Jack called again, louder this time. "Is anyone in there?" This time, he clearly heard a response, a small, frightened voice calling back. "Help us! We're stuck." Jack's pulse quickened. He approached the entrance cautiously, shining his flashlight into the darkness beyond the broken boards. The beam illuminated only a short stretch of tunnel before being swallowed by darkness. "How many of you are in there?" Jack called. "Just me and my brother," came the reply, the voice unmistakably that of a young girl. "I think he hurt his leg. We can't get out." Jack hesitated only briefly. The sensible thing would be to drive back to the house, call the sheriff, and wait for professional help. But the tremor in the child's voice and the growing darkness of the afternoon made the decision for him. "I'm coming in," he called. "Stay where you are and keep talking so I can find you." Carefully, Jack pushed away one of the loose boards, creating enough space for him to enter. Scout whined anxiously at his feet. "Stay, Scout," Jack commanded firmly. "Guard." The dog sat reluctantly at the entrance as Jack took a deep breath and stepped into the darkness of the Silvercrest mine for the first time in his life. The air inside the mine hit Jack like a physical presence, cool, damp, and heavy with the smell of earth and decay. His flashlight beam cut through the darkness, revealing a tunnel reinforced with old timber supports, some sagging dangerously under the weight of time. Water dripped somewhere in the distance, the sound echoing off the stone walls. "Keep talking," Jack called out, his voice bouncing back at him in eerie repetition. "I need to follow your voice." "We're here," the girl's voice called back, stronger now. "In a big room. There's water." Jack moved cautiously, testing each step before committing his weight. The floor of the tunnel was uneven, scattered with fallen rocks and debris. As he advanced deeper into mine, the daylight from the entrance faded until his flashlight provided the only illumination. The tunnel gradually widened, branching off in several directions. Jack paused at the junction, momentarily disoriented. "Hello?" he called again. "Which way?" "This way." The voice seemed to come from the leftmost tunnel. "Follow my voice." Jack turned into the left passage, noting with growing concern that the timber supports here were in worse condition. The walls glistened with moisture, and the air grew colder with each step. He estimated he'd gone about 100 yards into the mountain when the tunnel suddenly opened into a larger chamber. His flashlight revealed a space about 20 feet across, with a ceiling that rose well above his head. A shallow pool of water had formed in the center of the chamber, fed by water trickling down one wall. And there, on a raised section of rock at the far side of the pool, sat 2 children. The girl appeared to be around 12, with dark hair pulled back in a now messy ponytail. She wore jeans, sneakers, and a purple jacket, smudged with dirt. Beside her, a younger boy, perhaps 8 or 9, sat with his legs stretched out in front of him, his face pale beneath a shock of brown hair. Relief washed over the girl's face as Jack's flashlight illuminated them. "You found us. Are you a miner?" Despite the gravity of the situation, Jack found himself smiling at the question. "No, I'm Jack Harmon. I own the ranch below. This mine's been closed for decades." He stepped carefully around the pool, approaching the children. "What are your names?" "I'm Maya Fletcher," the girl said. "This is my brother, Ethan. We're staying with our aunt for the weekend. She lives in Pinewood." Jack knew Pinewood, a small town about 5 miles from his property. He knelt beside the boy, noticing his tear-streaked face and the awkward angle of his right leg. "Hey there, Ethan," Jack said gently. "Can you tell me what happened to your leg?" The boy sniffled. "I fell. We were exploring, and the ground gave way. I fell down to here." Jack carefully examined the leg without touching it. There was no visible bone or blood, but the ankle was swollen to nearly twice its normal size. "Probably a sprain, maybe a fracture," Jack said, keeping his voice calm. "How'd you end up here, Maya?" The girl looked down, guilt crossing her face. "Some kids at school were talking about this old mine. They said there was silver still in here. I wanted to see it. Ethan followed me." Her voice grew smaller. "It's my fault. We got lost. And then Ethan fell and our flashlight broke, and..." She broke off, tears welling in her eyes. "Hey now," Jack said softly. "What matters is getting you both out safely." He looked up at the rocky slope that led to where they sat. It was about a 6-foot drop, steep enough that climbing back up would be difficult even without an injured leg. Jack checked his phone again, still no signal. He glanced at his watch. 4:30 p.m. Daylight would be fading soon. "Okay, here's what we're going to do," Jack said decisively. "I can't carry you both out at once, and I don't want to leave either of you alone in here while I take the other out." He thought for a moment, assessing their situation. The temperature in the mine was dropping as evening approached. Both children looked cold and frightened, though Maya was putting on a brave face for her brother. "Maya, I need your help," Jack said. "I'm going to climb up there, and then I'll help you up. Together, we'll figure out how to get Ethan up without hurting his leg more. Can you do that?" The girl nodded, wiping her eyes with her sleeve. With careful movements, Jack found footholds in a rocky slope and pulled himself up to the ledge where the children sat. Once there, he reached down and helped Maya climb up beside him. "Good job," he said. "Now comes the tricky part." Jack removed his flannel overshirt, leaving him in his t-shirt. Working methodically, he fashioned a makeshift sling. "Ethan, this might hurt a bit, but I need to get your leg stabilized before we move you." The boy bit his lip, but nodded bravely. As gently as possible, Jack wrapped the shirt around Ethan's ankle, creating a crude but effective splint. Maya, I'm going to lift Ethan. I need you to hold my flashlight and lead the way out. Remember the path we took to get here. The girl hesitated, then nodded with determination. I think so. There was a junction with 3 tunnels. We came from the left one. That's right, Jack confirmed. Just stay close and move slowly. With great care, Jack lifted Ethan into his arms. The boy was lighter than he expected, but still substantial weight. His knee twinged in protest, but he ignored it. Let's go home, he said, and together they began the journey back through the darkness of the Silvercrest mine. The return journey through the mine proved more challenging than Jack had anticipated. Maya led the way, her small hand steady as she directed the flashlight beam along the tunnel. Ethan remained quiet in Jack's arms, occasionally whimpering when a misstep jostled his injured ankle. The weight of the boy strained Jack's aging muscles, but he pressed on, focusing on each step rather than the growing fatigue. At the junction of tunnels, Maya paused, uncertainty crossing her face. I think it was this one, she said, pointing to the middle passage. Jack frowned. He was almost certain they had come through the rightmost tunnel, but the disorienting darkness made it difficult to be sure. Before he could decide, a distant rumble echoed through the mine, followed by a shower of dust and small stones from the ceiling. What was that? Maya asked, her voice rising with fear. Probably just settling, Jack said, though he wasn't entirely convinced. These old mines were notoriously unstable, especially after years of neglect and Montana's harsh freeze-thaw cycles. Let's keep moving. I think it's the right tunnel, not the middle one. Maya nodded and changed direction. As they moved down the correct passage, Jack noticed more water on the ground than he remembered from their inward journey. The air felt different too, heavier, with a tension that reminded him of the moments before a summer thunderstorm. When they finally glimpsed daylight filtering through the mine entrance, Jack felt a surge of relief. Scout's silhouette appeared in the opening, the dog barking excitedly at their approach. We made it, Maya breathed, her pace quickening. The last 20 feet to the entrance seemed to stretch endlessly, but finally, they emerged into fading afternoon light. Scout danced around them, tail wagging furiously. Jack carefully set Ethan down on a flat rock near the entrance, his arms trembling from the exertion. Good boy, Scout, Jack said, patting the dog's head. Good boy. The sky had transformed during their time underground. Dark clouds now hung low over the valley, and a cool wind carried the unmistakable scent of rain. In the distance, lightning flashed over the mountains. We need to get down from here before that storm hits, Jack said, checking Ethan's makeshift splint. How's the ankle, buddy? It hurts, Ethan admitted, his face pale. But I'm okay. Jack assessed their situation. The path down to his truck was steep and would be treacherous if rain made it muddy. Carrying Ethan down would be risky for both of them. Maya, do you think you could make it down to my truck on your own? The keys are in the ignition. You could drive it closer to the path. The girl's eyes widened. Drive? I don't know how. Jack smiled reassuringly. Not up the mountain, just along the flat area at the base. It's an automatic. You just put it in drive and use the pedals gently. I taught my daughter when she was about your age. Maya looked uncertain, but nodded. I can try. That's all I ask, Jack said. He quickly explained the basics: ignition, gear shift, brake, gas, and pointed out the easiest route down. Take Scout with you. He'll help keep you on the path. As Maya started carefully down the slope with Scout at her heels, Jack turned his attention back to Ethan. The boy was shivering now, whether from cold or shock. Jack couldn't tell. He removed his jacket and wrapped it around Ethan's shoulders. Your sister's brave, Jack said, sitting beside him. Ethan nodded. She always takes care of me, even when she gets us in trouble. He looked up at Jack with solemn eyes. Are we in big trouble? Jack considered the question. Well, you two definitely shouldn't have been exploring this old mine. It's dangerous, as you found out. But the important thing is you're safe now. Thunder rumbled closer, and the first heavy raindrops began to fall. Our aunt is probably really worried, Ethan said quietly. We were supposed to be back for lunch. Jack checked his watch. Nearly 6 p.m. now. We'll get you home soon, he promised. And call your aunt from my house. They sat in silence for a few minutes, watching the rain intensify. Jack found himself wondering about these children, where their parents were, why they were staying with an aunt, what had really driven them to explore the abandoned mine. There was something in Maya's determined self-reliance that reminded him of his own daughter at that age. His thoughts were interrupted by the sound of an engine. To his surprise and relief, his old Ford pickup appeared at the base of the slope, moving slowly but steadily along the flat area, exactly where he'd instructed Maya to drive. The truck stopped at the point nearest the path, and he saw Maya climb out, looking both terrified and triumphant. She did it, Ethan said with a note of pride. She sure did, Jack agreed, impressed. Now for the hard part. I'm going to carry you down, but with the rain, it's going to be slippery. I need you to hold on tight and try not to move around too much. Ethan nodded seriously as Jack lifted him again. The rain was falling steadily now, turning the dirt path into slick mud. Jack moved with deliberate caution, testing each step before shifting his weight. His bad knee screamed in protest, but he gritted his teeth and continued downward. Halfway down, his foot slipped on a rain-slick rock. Jack lurched sideways, struggling to maintain his balance while protecting Ethan. Pain shot through his knee as he wrenched at stabilizing himself. "Are you okay?" Ethan asked, his arms tightening around Jack's neck. "I'm fine," Jack assured him, though the pain in his knee suggested otherwise. Not much farther now. By the time they reached the truck, both were soaked and muddy. Maya had already opened the passenger door and climbed into the middle seat. Jack carefully placed Ethan beside her, then limped around to the driver's side. Scout jumped into the truck bed, shaking water from his coat. As Jack started the engine and turned the heater to full blast, he looked at the two children huddled together in his passenger seat, dirty, wet, injured, but alive. Something long dormant stirred in his chest, a sense of purpose he hadn't felt in years. "Let's get you two home," he said, putting the truck in gear and starting down the rough track toward his ranch house, the first stop on their journey back to safety. The storm intensified as Jack drove carefully down the muddy ranch road. Rain drummed on the truck's roof, and wind buffeted the vehicle, but inside, a fragile sense of security had formed. Maya had found an old blanket behind the seat and wrapped it around her brother. Both children were quiet, the adrenaline of their ordeal beginning to fade into exhaustion. "We'll stop at my house first," Jack explained, navigating around a large puddle. "Get you dried off, check that ankle properly, and call your aunt. The cell reception is better there." "Is she going to be really mad?" Ethan asked in a small voice. Jack glanced at the boy. "She'll be worried sick, but mostly just relieved you're both safe." As they approached the farmhouse, Jack was struck by how different it looked through the children's eyes. Not the lonely place it had become for him, but a sanctuary of warmth and safety after their ordeal. Lights blazed from the windows, activated by the automatic timers he'd installed after Lane died. Once inside, Jack's caretaking instincts, dormant since Melissa left for college, kicked in with surprising ease. He found dry clothes, old T-shirts of his that hung like dresses on the children, and towels for their hair. He made hot chocolate, while Maya helped Ethan change, careful of his injured ankle. At the kitchen table, Jack examined Ethan's ankle more thoroughly. The swelling had increased, and bruising had begun to appear. "Definitely needs a doctor," Jack concluded, "but I don't think it's broken. Probably a bad sprain." With the children settled at the table, their hands wrapped around mugs of hot chocolate, Jack called the number Maya gave him for their aunt. The woman who answered sounded frantic before Jack could even explain who he was. "This is Carol Fletcher," she said. "Who's calling?" "Ma'am, this is Jack Harmon. I've got Maya and Ethan with me at my ranch. They're safe." The relief in her voice was palpable. "Oh, thank God. The police are here. We've been searching for hours." "Where were they? Are they hurt?" Jack explained the situation briefly, downplaying the danger while making it clear that Ethan needed medical attention. Carol told him she'd be there as quickly as possible with the police officers who were at her house. After hanging up, Jack returned to the kitchen to find Maya and Ethan looking around curiously at the photos on his walls. Elaine laughing on their wedding day. Melissa graduating high school, the three of them on horseback during happier times. "Is that your family?" Maya asked. Jack nodded, a familiar ache in his chest. "My wife Elaine and our daughter Melissa." "Where are they now?" Ethan asked with a child's directness. "Melissa's in college in Minneapolis. Elaine passed away 7 years ago. Cancer," Jack said simply. "I'm sorry," Maya said, her eyes suddenly older than her years. "Our mom died too, 2 years ago. That's why we're staying with Aunt Carol, while our dad's away for work." Jack felt a connection snap into place between them, the shared understanding of loss. "It's hard," he acknowledged, "but you've got each other. That helps." They fell into conversation then, the kind that sometimes happens between strangers who have shared an intense experience. Jack learned that their father was a construction manager currently overseeing a project in Seattle. Maya loved science and wanted to be a geologist, hence her interest in the mine. Ethan collected rocks and could name every type in his collection. Jack found himself telling them about his cattle, how he downsized the operation after Lane died, keeping just enough to manage on his own. He mentioned Melissa's environmental science studies and how she'd come home less frequently as she'd built her own life. "Do you get lonely here?" Maya asked with that same directness. The question caught Jack off guard. "Sometimes," he admitted, "but I got Scout and plenty to keep me busy." Before long, headlights appeared through the rain-streaked windows as several vehicles pulled up outside. Carol Fletcher burst through the door first, a slender woman in her 40s with the same dark hair as Maya. She rushed to the children, gathering them in a fierce embrace, tears streaming down her face. "I was so worried," she said, pulling back to look them over. "When you didn't come back for lunch, and then hours passed." She broke off, overcome with emotion. 2 police officers followed her in, along with a paramedic who immediately went to examine Ethan's ankle. Jack stepped back, suddenly feeling like an outsider in his own home as it filled with voices and activity. Carol approached him while the paramedic worked. "Mr. Harmon, I can't thank you enough. If you hadn't found them—" She didn't finish the thought. "Just glad I was there," Jack said simply. Maya was looking after her brother pretty well. "She's a brave kid." Carol smiled sadly. "They've had to be brave. Since their mother died, it's been tough. Maya's taken on so much responsibility." She glanced back at the children. "I should have been watching them more closely this weekend. Kids have a way of finding trouble no matter how careful we are." Jack said, "My daughter once decided to ride one of my horses bareback to visit a friend without telling me. Ended up with a broken arm when the horse spooked at a snake." This drew a small laugh from Carol, easing some of the tension in her face. The paramedic confirmed Jack's assessment. A severe sprain that would need proper medical attention, but not likely a break. They would take Ethan to the emergency room, to be certain. As they prepared to leave, Maya broke away from her aunt and approached Jack. "Thank you for finding us," she said solemnly, "and for teaching me to drive." Jack smiled. "You did good, kid, but maybe wait a few more years before you try driving again." To his surprise, Maya threw her arms around his waist in a quick, fierce hug. After a moment's hesitation, Jack returned it, something shifting in his chest. Even Ethan, being carried to the ambulance by the paramedic, called out, "Bye, Mr. Jack. Thanks for rescuing us." Jack stood on his porch long after the vehicles had disappeared down his driveway, the rain finally easing to a gentle patter. Scout sat beside him, leaning against his leg. Inside, his house seemed different somehow, as if the brief presence of the children had altered it in some fundamental way. The silence that had once felt like a comfort now seemed empty. 2 days later, Jack was mending the fence again when a car appeared on his driveway. Carol Fletcher stepped out, followed by Maya and Ethan, the latter on crutches with a proper brace on his ankle. "Hope you don't mind us dropping by," Carol called as they approached. "The kids insisted on bringing you something." Maya held out a clumsily wrapped package. Inside, Jack found a framed pencil drawing of himself and Scout, standing at the mine entrance. Though clearly done by a child's hand, Maya had captured something essential about both man and dog. "It's so we don't forget," Maya explained. "And we brought cookies," Ethan added, holding up a container. "Aunt Carol helped us make them." Jack invited them in for coffee and milk, listening as the children recounted their adventure to Scout, who seemed delighted by the attention. Before they left, Carol hesitated, then asked if Jack might be willing to show Maya and Ethan around the ranch sometime. Under proper supervision, of course. "I'd like that," Jack said, surprised to discover how much he meant it. Later, after they'd gone, Jack hung Maya's drawing beside the photos of his family. He took out his phone and did something he'd been putting off for too long. He called Melissa and made plans for her to visit during her upcoming break. As the sun set over Miller's Ridge, Jack sat on his porch with Scout beside him, looking out over his land toward the distant outline of the mountains. The abandoned mine was up there still, its dangers now sealed off properly by county workers. It had nearly claimed 2 young lives, but instead had given something back to Jack, a reminder that purpose could be found in unexpected places, and that even the deepest darkness sometimes led back to light. The ranch was still quiet, but somehow the silence had changed. It felt less like an ending now, and more like a pause, a breath taken before whatever might come next.